All right, we are recording for our slow shutter long exposure demo. So first thing I'm going to do is show you this video. Hi guys, Mr. Bartels here. I'm doing a little demo for how to do light. So just some context, I went down to Coronado at night. My wife drives a little Mazda MX-5, and I thought it'd be cool to set up a shot where we do a light painting of the car, make it look really nice with a handheld light, and then try to get the city behind the car. And then also show examples using a smartphone in this video too. Light painting. So what I'm going to be doing tonight is I've got a car set up with the Mazda MX-5. So we're going to be shooting this with the background over the San Diego Bay from Coronado. And so I'm going to show you my camera settings. So as you can tell here, I got my camera set up on a tripod. Again, it doesn't have to be on a tripod. This could be on any stable surface. So you could put your camera like in a shoe or on a stool or a chair, whatever you have with you where it'll just keep it stable. Doesn't have to be a tripod. And so it's fixed, and so basically wherever I shoot from, it's going to be in a fixed position, so I can light any side of it, and it'll all be put together in post in Photoshop, or I can do just one light swoop together. So I'm just gonna turn on my camera real quick, and then I can show you my settings. And so you can kind of see here. So with my settings, I'm shooting in the manual mode. With light painting and night photography, I'd recommend shooting in manual mode because if you try to do a shutter priority, it's going to have issues guessing how bright to make your photo. This way we have more control. And the reason why we want to have control on how bright it is because we're basically building up light with a handheld light. So you can see here, I have my ISO set to as low as possible, which is ISO 50. Most cameras go down to like ISO 100. That's what I would set it if I had that option. My aperture is set to around f13, which is in the middle, so that way I can go up or down, basically like close it down or open it up more to let more or less light in. And you can see my shutter speed is 30 seconds, so I'm giving myself lots of time to go around the car and light it with this small light. And the more I light it, the more it kind of builds up the light. And the other thing I have, you'll notice, is on a 2-second timer. So when I press the shutter, I have 2 seconds to go over to the car and start lighting. So it's not taking a photo right away. We got a 30-second exposure. I have it on a 10-second timer, and I have my aperture at f13, so that way I can let more light in from the city. And then my ISO is set to L, which is actually ISO 50. And so you can actually see my drive mode is at a 10-second. I have it on manual focus. That way every shot will be the same focus point. So I focus on the front part of the car. So that way you can actually, every shot will be the same focal point. I can actually move it to the background later and then put that into Photoshop. And then have it on RAW, so that way I have more flexibility. You could shoot this in JPEG. I have my white balance set to sunlight. And that way, when I do multiple exposures, it's not going to change around. It's not going to change the color temperature. So that way it's fixed as well. And so my ISO is set to L. I could go up to 100 or 200. You can see it gets brighter. And so you just you can play with that in camera depending on how bright you want your light to show up or how bright you want your background to show up. All right, guys, so what I'm going to do now is actually do the light painting. So I'm going to start my timer. Set a 10-second timer, and then I'm going to move my light over here if you want to follow me over. So what I'm going to do is use the light to light my subject. So I'm going to go and light the camera. So I can light different angles of the car. Get the wheels in different sections. And as long as my light doesn't face the camera, it won't show up in the photograph, so as long as I kind of keep it turned away. All right, let's check it out. So that's our light painted Mazda MX-5. Looks pretty good. So then what I can do is go through and play with the exposure, how bright I want it, and how kind of what size of the car do I want to light, and then basically as long as my camera doesn't move, I can just put in the pieces in Photoshop and just use the layer mask and paint the front side, the back side, the top side, so I can perfectly light each section, and that way it gets a nice result. So cool. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. So as you can see here, I did a light painting where I lit different sides of the car, and you get a nice background of San Diego. So I moved my tripod around, and then I light the wheels separately, lit the hood, the foreground of the car, the background, the top, and so you can actually put it in Photoshop and enhance all those different angles. This one, you can see that I added some lighting where I face the light towards the camera. So if you want light streaks, you need to point the light towards the camera when you're taking your photo. If you just want to light your person or object, then you just point it towards them. And then if you wanted to show up the streaks like on the top here, then you just turn your light towards your camera. So when you face the light towards the camera, it actually shows up. And this one I added a red gel. So I put a little red gel over the light, and then I lit that, and then you can see it makes some cool kind of red lighting on the car. Gel over the color of the light, and then I started playing with it, and then this will be the final edit here. So anytime you face the light towards the camera, you can actually see the light, and then anytime it's faced towards the subject, it lights the subject. This last one, I used the slow shutter cam on my iPhone. I set it up and then did a long exposure on my iPhone. So this is what I'll be talking about. So this was shot with my smartphone. So I set my smartphone up on a stable surface, and then I did a 10-second exposure with the slow shutter camera app, and I used my smartphone. This wasn't shot with a real camera. This was shot with my iPhone. And so you can get some good results just with your smartphone. All right. So if I were using said smartphone, right, what you can do, there's a couple of options. The free option is using just your standard camera app. And what you want to do in the standard camera app is turn on the live photo function. So that's the upper right. It looks like a little circle. If it has a slash through it, that means it's off. If you press it again, it'll turn it on, and it'll say live photo is on. And what that does is when you shoot a photo, sometimes it lets you record movies. So I'm just going to take a quick photo here. And so I took a live photo. And then when you take the photo in the top, it'll say live above the photo, so you know it's a live photo. And so then it gives you options. So if I swipe this up, you'll see these effects option below it. So some are like videos. The last option is called, let's see if we get the exposure, long exposure. So I'm just going to press that. And what it's going to do is it's going to, you see I have this like motion blur because I moved my camera as I shot it. So there's my long exposure with the live photo. And so what it's doing is basically taking 10 shots real quick and then using like a blending feature to kind of blend it together so it looks like a long exposure. And so that's the free option on your smartphone. So if you're doing it, the only downside of it is it's only like, I think it's like a half second, or I think it's about a half a second, and you can't change the time. You just get a half second, that's all you get. And so that is the option. It is good for shooting, showing like motion of like, you know, want to show water moving at the ocean. As long as your camera is still and it's stable and doesn't move as you shoot the photo, whatever's like the rocks, if it's like taking a photo of a beach with rocks and water, as long as my phone stays still, it'll get everything sharp that doesn't move, and then the water will move, and that'll show the motion blur. And so you can actually get some good, sorry, some good motion blurs. If you want to get a little bit more fancy, what I recommend is the slow shutter app right here, slow shutter. If you just search slow shutter in the App Store, please. No. Sorry. The cool thing about the slow shutter app is it gives you different options. So you can see here it's got different capture modes in the settings. It's got a motion blur where you can adjust the blur strength and the shutter speed. So the shutter speed goes as slow as 1/4 of a second, which is minimum. And then you can go as fast or as long as 60 seconds, right? You can also do bold mode, which is again you press it once to start your exposure, and then maybe you do like a couple minutes and then press it again, and it'll stop it. And then you can adjust your ISO, which is basically how sensitive it is to the light. It also has a light trail feature, so it says light trail there. So again, you can adjust the light sensitivity, the shutter speed time here with these little settings. So you just press this little setting wheel here, and then you can adjust all those options. And then it has a low light. So if I was shooting like the night sky, I wanted to shoot, sorry, it says low light right there on the top. That's when I would use that. And so then I would, if I was doing like a picture of the stars, I would put on the low light mode. It's $2. It's pretty cheap. There are some like okay apps. If you just search like slow shutter, there are a couple free ones. Some let you get photos up to like 100 exposures, and then you have to pay something, so you could just delete it then. So just search like long exposure or slow shutter in the app store, and you'll see some. I prefer the slow shutter app. It's $2, and it gives you a ton of options to shoot, pretty interesting photos just with your smartphone and get some pretty good results. And it gives you a lot more control, which is kind of the benefit of it. For some examples, I'm just going to go to here. It was, let's see, here we go. No, that's not what I wanted. I had a... I think I got rid of those. Okay, I was gonna show some slow shutter stuff. Oh, here we go. There it is. So these are, this one was with the real camera. So I was doing my shutter speed about 1/10 of a second, showing the wave splash against the rocks, water rippling over, as the water kind of comes in and out in the ocean. So just trying to show. These were with my iPhone. So I did some long exposures. They look kind of murky, but I'll show you how you can clean them up. So like, let's say this photo. I'm just gonna make a quick copy. And so once you start adding contrast, and then if you have the Photoshop Express app, you can do dehaze. It'll start to kind of clean things up. Dehaze and clarity and contrast, right? And so you can really start seeing the, see it more clear. So it will look kind of hazy at first. This one I did, I moved it, side to side. I moved the camera side to side, so it kind of captured the sun twice. And then, you just kind of add some contrast and dehaze, and it clears it up. So don't worry if it kind of looks kind of fuzzy. You can definitely, bring it out more once you start shooting. And so again, I showed it in the video, but I just want to show you on my camera how I'd set it up. So first thing I would do is put it in the M mode for manual. So it says M on the top. And so then I would make sure I have it on manual focus. So then I'd manually focus on what I was trying to shoot. So that way at nighttime it has a hard time focusing. So you don't want to be like trying to hunt around for autofocus. I would just switch it to manual and manually focus on what you're trying to shoot. And so then I'm just going into my settings. So if I press this little set button, I would change my drive mode to either a 2-second or 10-second timer, depending on, how long I want to shoot, how long of a delay. So if I press the shutter, it'll wait 2 seconds before it shoots, or I could do a 10-second timer, wait 10 seconds, and then it'll start shooting. So that way, when I press my camera, I'm not moving the camera and creating motion blur that I don't want. So you can change your ISO. So I put the ISO as low as possible when I'm doing light painting. Sometimes you want it brighter or darker. So the higher the number, the more brighter your lights will get. The darker, the least bright, right? So it just depends on how bright you want your lights to show up. It'll depend on how bright of lights you're using. And then, I would put the white balance to daylight, so that way it's not gonna guess around. So if I was using a colored light, it would change the color temperature of all my photos, and I'll kind of jump around. If I keep it at daylight, I can just adjust the color temperature in camera raw later and just kind of fix it then. And then your shutter speed. So I'm just gonna use the top dial here to change my shutter speed. So right now it's at 1/100th. Let's go down. So my camera goes down to, if I was doing like panning, I'd maybe do like 1/5 or like 1/20th, depending on how fast my subjects are. If I was doing long exposures, then I'd go, maybe start at like 8 or 10 seconds, see if that's enough time, maybe go up to 30 seconds if I need to, or I can go to bulb, and then I can basically press it once to start it, press it again to stop it. And then your aperture. So my camera is set up where you use this other dial to change the aperture. And so you can see on the back of the camera, it's saying, there we go, F. So mine goes down to f2.8. So depending on how bright I want it, I start at like f10, which is kind of in the middle. And then if I want it brighter, I'd go lower. So like f8, f6.3. And if I want it darker, it was like too bright, then I would go up. I'd go to f16 all the way up to like f22 if it was too bright. So it just kind of helps to kind of start with those settings, and then you can kind of adjust your aperture, adjust your ISO, and just like on how bright you want to make your photos. So I'm going to stop recording.